Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is The World This Week in partnership with the International Herald Tribune, and Bagger Murray is with us, and Elisabeth Moutet of the Sunday Telegraph, Stefan de Vries of RTL4 in the Netherlands. I say the Netherlands, but I guess Belgian people are allowed to listen too, right?
Yes, they are.
and Fouad Al-Obaid of the Kuwait Times. We were mentioning before the break on the last Tuesday, biggest demonstration since the fall of Hosni Mubarak. We're in Tahrir Square, and the State Department is talking about Iran instead. As of this Friday, Hillary Clinton yet to personally comment on Egypt. Instead, a State Department spokesperson who, to be fair, did denounce the heavy-handed use of force by police in Egypt, but also still very much banking on the current lineup, it seems, praising Field Marshal Tantawi for committing verbally to a speedier transition to civilian rule.
These are reassurances that the Egyptian people and many of the political parties had been seeking for some time. The fact that General Tantawi went out and reaffirmed them today was significant, and we certainly will hold the ruling authorities to the commitments that were made today.
That did not go down very well, and Elisabeth Moutet. Neither did the fact that a lot of the tear gas canisters people were showing me in the crowd were made in the USA.
Yes, because of course when you send all this aid, the aid is in the shape of equipment, and where do you might as well have your own workers build the equipment, as some of that money will get back into your economy, and that's one of the secrets of foreign aid everywhere. It's one way of getting the economy to work, especially in a recession.
And overwhelmingly, the biggest portion of that U.S. aid is to defense spending for the Egyptians.
Yes, tear gas is not exactly defense spending. It's something entirely different. It's also not lethal, so count your blessings on this one. But yes, it's we've mentioned before that the Egyptians are now looking for enemies, and they are the usual suspects outside. It's Israel, it's the United States, it's anybody but us, and inside, unfortunately, it's the Copts. And it's the minorities within the Egyptian people. Again, at the same time that you can see the sincerity of the demonstrators, and you can see that there is a problem, and there are people who would like to have freedom and development. At the same time, there ought to be some sort of self-examination. If they always turn to conspiracy theories and to shadowy culprits and victims outside, it's something that we've seen in the 20th century. It's not something very 21st century.
Fouad Al-Obaid, the UK Foreign Secretary this week, also saying effectively that there is no alternative right now to the military during this painful transition period, and actually quite a few Egyptians agree with that.
You need to have, at the end of the day, you need to have order. You need to have someone that's in control. In a sense, they're right. Who's going to lead the country? Even the opposition in Egypt right now is not united as to who they would like to see as a candidate. It's a very wide mass. It's kind of like the Wall Street movement, where there is no real leadership, or at least no apparent leadership. And certainly the continuity of government is something that one needs to take into consideration. A country like Egypt with 80 million people, I think the military could have done a better job. I hope that they will do a better job in the future, but certainly going out and killing your fellow citizen, that's a very poor sign of doing a good job.
Stefan de Vries, damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you're the West dealing with a crisis like this one?
Yeah, well, what can we do? We can. It's a very difficult situation, especially for the United States, because they are the biggest sponsor of Egypt since 30 years already, and so we just have to let this go its way, because these are the people who did it. The people on Tahrir Square, they did it by themselves. We did not impose democracy as we did so successfully in Iraq or Afghanistan, and that's something we should should not forget. It's the same thing in Tunisia. The people did it themselves, and that's a lesson we have to learn, and it's a very important lesson for the West, because we always think that we know how to do things, and we want to impose our model onto societies which are not exactly the same as our societies, and that doesn't work anymore. So we have to respect the Egyptian people.
Interesting, Anne Bagger Murray, was that a lot of people who I spoke to they were looking, their frustrations, they were looking to Turkey, saying, how come things are taking off in Turkey and they're not taking off here?
That is a very interesting turn of events. It's actually positive if they're looking for regional models a lot closer to home in societies that might be a lot closer in composition to Egypt. It might actually, instead of, once they decide that they have something to learn and might actually take something from what's been happening in Turkey, I think they're probably on a good path.
I mean, also the question of democracy in a lot of these Arab Spring revolution, post-revolutions, is the fact that a lot of the people that are going out to run for parliament and are getting elected are Islamist or Islamic leading candidates, which is not surprising. I mean, the majority of the country is Muslim, so that would not be a shock. But to the West, that's a concern in the sense that they have an idea that all Islamists tend to be Al-Qaeda type, which I think is a very misconstrued kind of image that they have. And a lot of the people there on the street are looking at Turkey, as you justly said, not because it's because it's a country, that has adopted a moderate Islamic kind of model of government. The AKJ party is an Islamist party, and so they're kind of trying to build a similar economic success, keeping the morals at bay, and also dealing with their own people that actually want to be more religious. I mean, they have, under secularism, have been denied a lot of their worshipping rights, especially in Tunisia, I'm thinking about, but also in Egypt and other countries. And they want to take back their power through religion. They want to find something that unites them all, and religion seems to be the common denominator that unifies them.
All right, and Turkey, by the way, scoring, I guess you could say, more brownie points this week with a speech in London by the Turkish president, who warned of a return to the Dark Ages, speaking not of Egypt, but of Syria. Abdullah Gül warning Bashar al-Assad that his crackdown on the opposition could, quote, drag the whole region into turmoil and bloodshed. His prime minister went even further.
If you want to see somebody who has fought against its own people until death, look at Nazi Germany, look at Hitler, Mussolini, Romania's Ceausescu. If you don't draw lessons from these, then look at the Libyan leader who was killed just 32 days ago after pointing guns at his own people and using the same expressions as you.
And Elisabeth Moutet, has your view of Turkey changed since the start of the Arab Spring?
No, it hasn't really changed, because I'm still of the opinion that Turkey wants to rebuild in some ways the Ottoman Empire by different means. It wants hegemony on the region. It certainly wants moral hegemony on the region. I think that in the past years, Turkey has been trying to be the alternative as the proper leader for the Muslims and for the of the whole Mediterranean basin.
So many in the West are probably secretly hoping that the Turks, as one Syrian general, dissident Syrian general claims, will be the ones to intervene, something that they can't do inside of Syria.
They have an army, which is, as far as I know, still part of NATO, which is going to be interesting to watch. And they have certainly a state which, it's industrial. It's an entirely different state of development than most of the Arab states. So, but I also see a great political ambition. They want to be the alternative. It may be a more reassuring alternative than, say, the Iranians. But it's interesting to watch. And nobody's ever calling them the old colonial power, but that's what they were in the 17th and 18th and 19th century.
Fuad Al-Abad, your reaction to that? Do you agree that there is this Ottoman streak?
It's a soft power strategy, and it's working to their advantage. I mean,
it's just soft power.
Well, for the timing, it is soft power. I mean, even if you look at a few years ago, I mean, a lot of Arab TV shows now, a lot of shows on the Arab TVs are Turkish soap operas that have been translated into Arabic and have given a greater appeal to Turkey. A lot of shows on Turkey's development.
I've seen some.
They're very good. They're very good. I've seen one that is aired on NBC. It's an excellent show. I mean, they kind of blend in, the region's cultural and more with European charm. It's a mix of modernity, tradition, history, and yes, to an extent, they do have an imperial, perhaps, agenda that's not overt at this point, but it's a welcome agenda, I guess, in a region that's trying to find a new center, a new leadership. I mean, with Egypt in dismay, with the, even Saudi Arabia not being able to put a real be the leader in the region. They're looking for someone, and Turkey seems to be the viable candidate.
It's not just in the region that countries are looking to Turkey to be the model. I mean, when the Muslim Brotherhood looked like it was gaining in power, might be the viable alternative in Egypt, a lot of Americans especially were very nervous about the fact that it was called the Muslim Brotherhood, and they remembered certain parts of history that were a little bit unsavory. Many, many times people would pop up and say, no, wait a minute, there is an Islamist government in Turkey, and it's not that way. You have to revise and broaden your perception of what it means to have a government that is based, at least in some parts, on Islam. And so Turkey is often held up, and elections in Libya, elections in other parts of the Arab world, often Turkey comes up as the calm down, it doesn't have to be, you're not electing Al-Qaeda, you might be electing a party like the AKP or wherever.
So I'd actually even comment. I mean, a lot of discussion on democracy. I think the question is not democracy. Islam is not incompatible with democracy. It's maybe incompatible with liberal democracy, which is a completely different concept. But in terms of people electing their own, leaders, I think people at the end of the day are sensible. They know what their interests. I mean, one would hope at least, but they're interested in electing someone that represents them, someone that can understand them. All of them are looking for economic development, but at the same time, they want to do it from a grassroots movement where it's us electing our people, trying to develop our own country in the way we see fit, not an imposed model such as, the ancient dictators in the region.
All right, we've talked about Washington, looking at the situation in Egypt, and we don't have time, but we could have talked about them looking at the situation in Yemen. Let's talk about Paris, looking at the situation in a former protectorate, Morocco, where several times since the start of the Arab Spring, the French have praised Morocco's king for instigating constitutional reforms, an evolutionary process. The turnout, though, for the first election since that reform, pale in comparison to what the likes of Stéphane de Vries witnessed in Tunisia last month.
We boycotted the Constitution, which was a farce, and we refused the Constitution under which these elections are held. So it's only natural and logical that we boycott this election after boycotting the Constitution.
Stéphane de Vries turnout not very high. People don't have a lot of faith in the process in Morocco. The feeling for the French here is a tricky one, because the foreign minister at the National Assembly this week saying that he's both confident and vigilant when it comes to the situation in Morocco, and talking about the Islamist parties, even saying you can't ostracize a party just because it refers to the Muslim religion. So how much would you say that countries like France have now rolled with the punches compared to the situation it was a year ago?
Well, I think when he says that he's vigilant, he's probably talking about France's business interests and not really the interests of the people. Voter turnout has been traditionally low in Morocco the last 10 years or so, maybe even before. Over half of the population of Morocco is illiterate, so they don't know how to write or read, so they are not really implicated in the society. Basically, I think a lot of Moroccans I spoke with, and also a lot of people of the 20 February movement, they really don't believe that something has changed. The new constitution is more or less copy-paste of the old constitution with some very cosmetic changes. So it's basically very smart move of the king, Mohammed VI. He tries to change some things and let the people believe that he's really changing and moving towards a real democracy. And that's the reason why, until now, in Morocco, it stays relatively calm, but basically nothing has really changed.
Nothing's really changed. Now, being away in Egypt this week, I thought you guys would sort out this whole sovereign debt crisis thing that's going on. Instead, the cost of borrowing, well, it's now cheaper in the United Kingdom than it is in Germany. And this, for the first time since 2009, we can perhaps call up the graph. There it is. The Germans having a hard time with selling bonds. By the way, the Italians this Friday having a horrible time during a bond auction. The euro has plummeted against the dollar. We can look at the front cover of The Economist this week. And the front cover of The Economist is saying, well, is this really the end? Anis Benmouté, is this really the end?
Of course it's not the end. And it's not
a good cover, though.
It's not, well, it's an excellent cover, and they have good covers, and they have wonderful captions, so yes, and headlines. And so, hats off. But it is absolutely not the end. When you look at the debt, the dollar is now sort of going up against the euro. If you look at the debt of the United States, they say, oh, it's comparable to the debt of, say, France. It's 79% of GDP, and France is 80%. It's the same thing. It's not the same thing at all. The debt of all our the Eurozone countries countries is calculated according to the Maastricht criteria, which means that any public debt is included, and that means cities, it means departments, it means the social services, it means everything. And in America, it's the federal
Just
debt.
the federal government.
Not the states, not the municipalities, not the pensions, not the Fed national health, nothing of that. If you had to calculate it the way we are obliged to calculate it, it would be 160%. So I think the wisdom of the markets has spoken once more, and, you know, we should keep calm.
And Bagger-Mary, I was away. Was it a long week for you? I know you work on the business desk.
It was a long week. It was a long week. It's been a long week for about the last, I don't know, 10 months. Yeah.
18 months.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important to remain calm at moments like this. I mean, the German bond sale, which is what everybody focused on this week, the Germans had a hard time selling bonds. Well, and that was the headline flash throughout the day, and that's what markets were supposed to be reacting to. Just a couple of things to point out. The Germans have failed to sell out their bond issue 9 times this year. This is not an unusual occurrence. This particular bond issue coming when it did had a great symbolic significance, but in the grand scheme of things, it is not an unusual occurrence. They'll just pick them up and sell them another time. It's happened 9 times this year. Second, there has been a lot of rhetoric about countries leaving the euro and contagion reaching the center of Europe and so on and so forth. You have to look very carefully at what that all means. It's very difficult for a country to leave the euro. Yes, people are making contingency plans, but it doesn't happen when Germany fails to sell out its bonds. Third, the markets, whom we all look to tell us what to think, at least not everybody at this table certainly, but a lot of people in the world, the markets knew about the German bond sale all day long, and they didn't even react to it. There was a little fluctuation around the flat line for most of the day in the European markets.
So a call for cooler heads. There was a sit-down, or rather a photo op, in Strasbourg Thursday between the leaders of the Eurozone's 3 largest economies on Euro bonds. Giving more powers to the European Central Bank is a no-no, says the German Chancellor. Angela Merkel refusing to budge as well when it comes to the issue of granting more powers to the ECB in Frankfurt.
The ECB is independent, even if we modify European treaties. The ECB is there to oversee the money supply and for the stability of the currency. Concerning the modification of the treaties, we are looking into a possible fiscal union, which means closer political ties. But that is a different matter, and that's what we will put forward. But this does not involve the ECB.
We're almost out of time. Stefan de Vries, one sentence here. Will Germany be able to stand their ground on this one?
No. I mean, Angela Merkel has changed her opinion at least 10 times since April 2010 when the Greek crisis broke out, and she will change again. She has no other option.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Stefan de Vries, I want to thank you. Anne Bagger-Mary, Fouad Al-Obaid, and Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, thank you for being with us here in The World This Week. Stay with us, because next it's time for business, and we'll get, I guess you could say, more bad news. Catherine Nicholson has the details.